Okay. So this is kind of what we went over before. We've got two kinds of mechanisms that we're actually studying, proximate and ultimate. And proximate are how behaviors happen. What are the mechanisms behind those behaviors? What stimuli initiates those behaviors? And obviously there's many, many, many different levels involved in behavior. There's hormonal levels, cognitive levels, or at least neurological levels. And then there's visual levels, all the different senses. Some animals have additional senses that they use that initiate certain behaviors, like bats hunting moths. They use echolocation. These are all proximate, and this is mainly what we're going to be dealing with in class, but all of these obviously have, well, you would perhaps assume that all of them are ultimate mechanisms that are either because of what happened in the past or because natural selection is actually working at this very moment. And so, in terms of ultimate behavior, does it affect fitness? Does it affect how many offspring that you individuals leave into the future generations? Now, and we'll discuss this a little bit, but remember, not everything that you see is necessarily adaptive. It's nice to think that natural selection and all that is working constantly and improving populations over time. But you have to think about things that sometimes that aren't adaptive, that are perhaps holdovers to previous behaviors that are no longer adaptive. So we know all about phylogenetic history, right? We have a lot of things that we inherited from our ancestors. We have like vestigial traits. Now, some people say an appendix is a vestigial trait from when our ancestors were eating more foliage, and that it's now shrunk, but it's not shrinking any further. But there's a new hypothesis that actually it provides a function. But certainly one maladaptive behavior that humans have, well, what's a good maladaptive behavior that humans have? Can you think of something that is a holdover that, well, something that happens to humans and you can't think of rhyme or reason why it should. In fact, it should probably go away. Anything?
Procrastination.
Huh?
I was thinking procrastination, but I don't know.
Oh, yeah, well, that's true. No, that's good. Perhaps. So, yeah, that's a good question. So, why do we procrastinate?
Well, I procrastinate a lot, personally, and it's because it helps with the anxiety, too. Like, you don't have to worry about something, you just put it off. You say, oh, I'm not going to worry about it for the next week. Like, if another professor gave an assignment or something, like, and it's due in like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, for the first week or two. Not your class, but every other class.
Oh, I know, obviously.
I'll just not worry about it for the next week or two, and then do it later.
But what happens if you get right down to the wire? You keep putting it right off.
Yeah, you can't procrastinate too long, but you
really?
gotta find your comfort.
God, I find I do that all the time. What kind of so procrastination is approximate things, but does it perhaps affect our fitness? Or is procrastination some other cognitive function, part of another cognitive function in deciding how to proceed with traveling through the world? What do we usually procrastinate? Not eating a milkshake, right? No. Huh?
Homework.
Homework, yeah. Anything else?
discussion
Things that
before.
are things that are stressful or
Stressful, yeah. Like, I remember, yeah, when I had this girlfriend, occasionally she'd say, Mo, we have to talk. Now, nary a word like that has ever been spoken that put more fear of God in me, and I'm an atheist. And so I initially would say, well, sorry, I have to go surfing, but I already told you that I was once 6'5" and blonde hair and blue eyes, and I was really shallow. So we kind of understand that behavior. So I was putting things off. It wasn't necessarily the best thing for the relationship. But it sure was fun surfing. Except when the shark bit. No, the shark didn't bite me. But what kind of? I'm just trying to think. What kind of ultimate? How might this affect fitness by putting things off or not dealing with them? Anybody? Well, it short-term reduces the stress, but long-term, God, it seems like it might really increase the screws. Yeah, well, we'll let that one lay. It's interesting though. It's a good question. God, I want everybody to think about what else decision-making processes and how procrastination. I mean, maybe it's just humans are just we're wired so that we just don't want to deal with shit.
You can also help your focus. Like you have something very important coming up.
Yeah.
And you don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
Then just don't worry about it.
Right.
And,
Yeah.
go on with your day.
Yeah. I mean, in some respects, I do my best.
Sometimes,
It just stresses you out.
if you're not organized,
What's that?
Everything he has just said is bullshit.
He's what? He's full of it?
Okay, I can't do it. He's saying leave it all to like the last minute. That doesn't work. You just stress yourself out even more pulling an all-nighter. And then
But
you
he
sleep
doesn't.
for days.
you get to enjoy it a little bit.
Well,
Like,
everybody's
right?
Everybody's different. Yeah. God, it's certainly a conundrum. I mean, one hypothesis may be that humans just don't like to deal with shit, right? So how would you test that? Think about an experiment that you would do. It'd be pretty simple, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Well, not talking about your experiment, but there's been a study that hypothesizes that procrastination is actually genetic.
Uh-huh.
So it could also be just, a mutation from the past, because procrastination is irrational, right? It doesn't really serve a function.
Yeah.
And it afflicts some people and it doesn't afflict others. Like she was saying she can't procrastinate. He was saying he loves to procrastinate. So it could
Yeah,
just
there's a
be,
polymorphism there.
it could just be like something genetic from the past that was just a mutation that causes one or the other.
Yeah, that's good. No, it's there's a lot of there's a study on antisocial behavior. I guess procrastination is some form of that, perhaps. Like, not necessarily with your homework, which you might be antisocial with your homework, but like, let's say, your spouses or lovers or whatever. And anyway, there was this study in New Zealand, and they had this long history from like 20 years worth of data where they were following a cohort of children. And they took all this kind of data about what kind of socioeconomic data, how many members were in the family, was it just one family member raising the kids or two, things like that. And then, because they were wondering, why do some kids grow up to be sociopaths? It's a good question. is it genetic? Perhaps. And people were wondering, well, yeah, that'd be pretty bad. Grow up being a sociopath. Genetic, you can't really help yourself. It kind of shoots the whole criminal justice system in the foot. But anyway, what they found was they actually found a candidate gene, I think MAOA, or I forget what it was. I'll put it up. And they found that there was a genetic polymorphism that correlated. Oh, I know, they did genome-wide research. They found some areas where there might be a polymorphism that affects behavior. And they found that, we'll call it the wild type, that people who grew up in a good environment, supportive, enough to eat, all that kind of stuff, people did fine. They grew up in a poor environment, they also didn't turn out to be sociopathic assholes. But then they looked at this other allele variant, and they found, lo and behold, that if you had these kids with this other variant and they were in a good environment, they turned out fine. But in a bad environment, they didn't. In other words, so there's a genetic component, like you said, but it's mediated by the environment. So why would it be, why might it be adaptive to be a sociopath in a bad environment?
Sociopaths control their environment, don't they? So
Mhm.
that if their environment is bad, and if they're displaying sociopathic tendencies, they're trying to control it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, exactly. So there's nothing to stop you from doing it and get your way. And if there's some other individual in there that's always happy, well, not for long, right? Because you're going to come along and take it away. Do whatever you want. So you can think about, in certain environments, it's certainly perhaps adaptive where you leave more offspring. I mean, just think about, there's been an ongoing conflict, well, a lot of places, but let's say the Congo. And, you know, the soldiers use rape. Well, they all rape everybody. Okay? At least half the kids, it looks like, are fathered because of rape and soldiers. But if you think about that environment, well, it's adaptive, isn't it? Does anybody think it's not adaptive? Okay. I mean, it's horrible, right? In terms of normative values that we hold dear, we would think, oh, this is just absolutely beyond the pale. You know, no way we can countenance this. In fact, there's a lot of things in nature that we would never countenance. We've decided, as a society, that this is how we want to live. But in that environment, it's the strong that leave more offspring, and the weak perish. It's as simple as that. So if you're in that environment you have the underlying genetics that turns you into a sociopath, obviously that allele is going to spread in that population compared to the one where everybody's going to turn out somewhat fine. Now, what about the other way around? How do we stop what's going on with sociopaths in good environments? Do they survive a long time or not? You said some do, maybe? Okay. Do you think some of them ever get caught? Yeah. So what's usually catching them? Well, how about getting locked up, right? So there's a police force going along. Now, if it's a smaller group, of course, let's say you are hunter-gatherers. You would think everybody knows everybody. And if there's, let's say, an asshole in your group, there's ways to kind of control that individual. Because a lot of hunter-gatherers are fairly egalitarian. Doesn't mean that there aren't, certain individuals that you look up to. But in our society, beyond a bigger group, there are actually institutions that we put in place to stop this kind of stuff. So if you think about a rapist in this environment, eventually you hope they're going to get caught. And how is that going to affect their fitness? I would lower it, right? It's hard to procreate in jail with your with Tiny, right? I mean, it is. And he's French, by the way. I don't know why he's French, but he used to be he was a tractor mechanic, with big tools. His name Tiny, and he was really sweet. I mean, I'll tell you, yeah, like I really knew. No, anyway, so that's Tiny. You can imagine how that would affect your fitness, even if they didn't kill you. Put death row or whatever. Well, it might kill you. You might actually want to think, God, I wish Tiny would just kill me. Put me in solitary. Anything kept me away from it. And then in the end, of course, you're going, oh, Tiny, you're so beautiful. I mean, I don't know. So what would happen with a sociopathic gene in an environment where there was actually some sort of policing going on? There might be strong pressure against it. Now, has anybody ever, everybody, I'm sure, have you met people that you just can't trust?
But there might actually, I don't think it'll die out, because actually the sociopathic gene would just get stronger. Because there's a study that shows that most people that have power, whether it's in corporations or government, they are basically sociopaths.
Right.
So all the leaders they have to be able to manipulate situations in order to get to the top.
Yeah. But the question is, does that mean that all of these sociopathic guys on Wall Street grew up in bad environments? Remember, because we're saying that this only really shows up in bad environments.
Or the study could just be a poor study.
Well, absolutely.
To begin with.
Yeah.
I don't think. There must be some other sort of sociopathic gene.
Yeah.
That's like the super sociopathic gene that,
Yeah.
more or less runs the world.
It's also, do you think a sociopathic gene in a good society would be more adaptive or less adaptive in terms of frequency? I mean, could you work under the radar if there weren't very many sociopaths around? Yeah. If there were a fair number circulating, well, first of all, in a good environment, they'd be hammered. Presumably, unless they became a corporate, raider or something like that. So there's that, luckily, fortunately, there's an outlet for that. Our capitalist system relies on sociopaths to make everything available to us. It's pretty good. I want to be a sociopath. I guess I am. This is my own little domain, isn't it? So, and there's not much you guys can do. Well, no, I guess you could turn me in. Yeah.
I think I think the gene just gets refined, and it has to increase in frequency because the population is getting larger. You have more and more positions of social, and it's like what you said, like even within this classroom, there's small little fiefdom, right? And I've noticed that a lot of people, whenever they are able to have some sort of power, no matter how large or how small, they tend to display some sort of like power grab, and those type of people might have a sociopathic gene.
Yeah. In fact, it's not like you're either a sociopath or not. We all do a little bit of deception, don't we? Sometimes we're doing the best deception with ourselves, but we won't talk about that. But in general, I mean, we don't tell, well, first of all, the people that let's say we love, we certainly don't tell them the truth. about stuff that bugs you about them, right? You know, you're the most beautiful, da, 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 but I wish you wouldn't do that stuff. You know, that hurts someone's feelings, or it's like, oh, are you looking at the other girl walking down the street, or that other guy, or all that kind of stuff. So you don't tell them that, well, of course, I'm attracted to anything that's moving with a pulse, In fact, a cantaloupe in a warm field, never mind. Boy, oh boy, that's bad. Yeah, okay. So, anyway, I was, originally I was thinking about choking, right? I mean, why are people prone to choking? You would think that's so we're going to get away from the fun stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about choking. Now, if you want to combine choking, well, a lot of times sociopaths do combine choking and, oh my God, it's never going to end.
How about a hiccup? Like, why do we hiccup?
What?
What about like a hiccup?
Yeah, I don't know.
What is that?
It's a cramp in your diaphragm.
Really?
Mm-hmm. So that's the cause. That's the approximate cause of it. Is there probably anything ultimate about it?
Yeah, there's a cramp. I mean, that's a problem.
No.
I mean,
Does it affect your fitness?
no. I mean,
Nah.
There's one guy who hiccuped for like 60 years in a row.
Yeah?
You know,
Well, obviously, yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of.
I mean, if
it's
you're
funny.
hiccuping all the time,
No, there are people who do.
yeah. But no, I mean, so that's really like a byproduct of some physiological sort of thing, right?
Yeah, the other one.
But choking is certainly, forget about the fact that, no, I mean choking on a piece of meat. Oh, sorry, oh my God. Holy, I can't get away from it. You guys are sick. I'm talking about a ribeye here, not a young filly.
That's hilarious.
I guess I have to start looking for a new job. Okay, no, I mean a ribeye. And it turns out, of course, that if, our ancestors were fish that had kind of a proto-lung. The swim bladder and the swim bladder, and then the esophagus, they were somewhat separate. But then as the swim bladder started becoming useful as a lung, they actually came together. And of course, in most animals, they don't choke because the area where the valve is, to stop things going down the wrong way, is either up higher and the trachea is down lower, or whatever. I forget exactly how it goes. Okay. And it also turns out that to talk, we need certain things in certain areas. And so with humans, that kind of conspired to put the two coming together in the same, they use the same entryway, right? I mean, that's kind of a bummer to begin with. So if you were a great designer, would you ever design a system where you could possibly choke that way? You'd have two separate, dedicated, separate lines if you were going to actually go ahead and design something. Unless you were just a lousy designer. So I guess, what is it, the design, intentional, what is it called, design, where there's God?
Intelligent.
Intelligent, yeah, it's not a very good proxy for intelligence, so. Anyway, and then it turns out also babies, before they can talk, I forget what the structure is, but it doesn't drop until individuals can start to be able to talk. And so babies are actually less prone, even though they spit up all the time. They're less prone to, choke. Well, they're not going to be eating a ribeye anyway. I mean, maybe some, what was it, Family Guy or something. The guy.
Stewie.
What?
Stewie?
Yeah, exactly. He'd be eating a ribeye. but he's just a foul mouth, you know. He's definitely a sociopath. So, and so that's something where that's actually it does affect fitness. There is an ultimate, and you're wondering, well, that's maladaptive. Why doesn't evolutionary get rid of it? Well, there's constraints on it. Okay, so I guess we should go ahead on one thing. So, this is kind of going over, you know, it can be molecular, genetic, physiological, cognitive, all sorts of different things to elicit behavior. And it can also be developmental. So certain behaviors have to go through developmental phases before they become fully operational. Think about, with humans, language, with birds singing. And then, of course, you know, there's fitness, and then there's evolutionary history. What?
Other primates choke,
No.
just humans.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a few that get a colobus monkey down the wrong, you know.
Is it because, so are we able to talk because of the position of
Yeah,
our?
yeah,
and they're not?
exactly. So there was strong, it looks like there was strong selection for audio communication, talking. And that was more so than the fact that you might choke, right? So there's competing interests there. It's kind of it's a trade-off. And in this case, talking wins out. If you live in an environment where you don't have to talk, like you're all by yourself, well then you've just got a holdover that you get no benefit from.
Choke? They can choke?
Who?
Parrots?
Parrots?
Yeah, because they talk too, right?
Yeah, I don't know what their voice box looks like. Oh, it's the pharynx, that's right. So the pharynx drops as you get older. So, okay. So, I don't think I can use this. Oh, no, I can. Is it on? Yeah, good. Okay, so we already did this. This is the observation about the bee wolves. This was in the field portion, but anyway, we went over a little bit in the last class, and we've got these bee wolves that they have a nest, they go out, they catch honeybees, other wasps catch other things, they bring them back to the nest, they lay their eggs on the honeybees, which then, and the honeybees aren't dead, they're just paralyzed. So they're in a kind of a state of, well, who knows whether they're conscious or not. If they're conscious, God, that would be cruel. I'm just thinking, oh, never mind. Okay, so, and the question that you have is, you know, let's say you have this observation, they circle around and leave. Well, why do they do that? And one hypothesis is that, well, or one question is, how do they find their nest? So what's one of the hypotheses for how they find their nest?
Orientation?
Uh-huh.
Orientation.
Orientation of objects.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, so they use landmarks. There's a little shrub here, there's a kind of a rock here, at this angle there's a tree, whatever they use. Okay. What's another hypothesis for how they find their nest?
Smell.
Huh?
Smell.
Smell. So maybe they fly around and they're sniffing, and they're pretty good at detecting odors, and their area, let's say they've left a pheromone or something like that, they find their way back. Okay. Another one? The objects themselves. Okay, it's not just the orientation, but actually the objects themselves. That's another. And so, like hypothesis 1 and prediction, and hypothesis 2 and prediction. Oh, I kind of blew that. Hold on. Okay. for hypothesis 1, if landmarks around the nest would be changed in the absence of the bee wolf, it would take longer to find the nest. And if landmarks can be moved, the bee wolf should be misdirected. Okay. In other words, misdirected to where the orientation and the objects are. So, as we know, with prediction 1, with the hypothesis number 1, when landmarks around the nest were altered, the bee wolf appeared to be confused. So let's say you had a ring of objects around the nest, whether it was rocks or pine cones or whatever, and if you changed it to a triangle after they left, they'd come back, they'd be confused. Now, it could also be, you know, a hypothesis where it's not just, it's the objects as well as the orientation. And then, of course, this one, if the landmarks are, let's say, moved, let's say a meter away, that the bee wolf coming back, the female will come back to that area thinking her nest is right in the middle, and it's not. So that's the kind of, if you actually start reading the book, that's the way they present things. They present things in a really concise scientific methodology. You see something, you wonder what the hell's going on, because that's what we do science for. Also to be famous, I think, but anyway, basically to find out what's going on. And then we start coming up with explanations, and humans do that all the time, except that we also use a shorthand called belief, which is where we think we come to a conclusion without actually testing it. We do that. I mean, you just can't think of every move that you make. You kind of project it in a scientific framework. You'd never be able to walk. You know, if I'm going to walk, what's the best way should I walk? You'd never get anywhere. Okay, so. And of course, with these bee wolves in Tinbergen, and Tinbergen was the guy who did it, it showed that, in fact, it was the orientation of the objects. Now, remember that video I showed you of the bull and the motorcycle, right? I would think that would stay in your mind for a while. Maybe you wouldn't want it to, but anyway, a lot of times the stimulus is sometimes a simple thing. It's not like it has to be exactly that, let's say, an animal or something. Like prairie dogs are very attuned to avian predators like hawks and stuff like that. And they're also attuned to terrestrial predators, and they have different calls for each. So some guy actually looked and started, they had a pulley system over this prairie dog town. The prairie dogs were kind of habituated to the people. And they would fly out separate kinds of things. One would kind of look like, let's say it's a model of a hawk. Another is kind of a general hawk shape. Another is just kind of like a triangle, like a kite. Another was, let's say a box or something like that. And did they cue in on certain features, not necessarily the whole hawk? So obviously they responded to the hawk. But all it really took was I think it was a triangle that initiated that behavior. Oh, here comes the call, there's something flying, they're going to, come along and take off Johnny. Something like that. Okay. So, in this case, it was something simple. It was just landmarks. And, of course, I would imagine, well, the landmarks probably don't change very often. If they marched around, well, it wouldn't even matter because they're doing a little navigation thing anyway. So this is kind of what they did. Okay. These are black-headed gulls. And they have a nest. And people notice that once the chicks have hatched, or let's say some of the eggs get damaged. The black-headed gull removes them from the nest. Why? What's the question? Why would they do that, and what's the hypothesis? Yeah?
Takes up room.
Okay. Takes up room. Think that's testable?
Yeah, you can put other things in there.
Absolutely. Good. Any other hypothesis? Besides taking up room?
It's just not needed anymore, so why even keep it?
Well, that's kind of the room hypothesis. Okay.
So they don't choke?
Huh?
Hygienic.
Hygienics? Okay. So it's stuff that stays in the nest, breeds bacteria, gets the chicks sick. That's an adaptive hypothesis. Good.
To lead predators astray.
Okay, good. That's right. So let's say eggshells, they're kind of white and bright, and there's predators that come along and steal the eggs. Usually they don't steal the adults. Adults are too it's too much work, but they steal the eggs. And if the adults are sitting on the eggs all the time, and everything's kind of copacetic, but you get rid of the eggshells, and the predators, let's say, don't key in. Okay. So we'll say the first one is just the nest gets too crowded. So as you pointed out, you could set up a situation where you actually, I'm trying to think exactly how to do this, but where one nest, you put a lot of objects in, what happens to it, and then another nest, you don't. And then it could also be, is it just specific kinds of objects that they get rid of, right? Let's see, the hygienic hypothesis. Okay. In this case, you could actually apply treatment. You could have the eggs that are infected with a pathogen in one nest, and then in the other nest is a control where the eggs aren't. And you make sure there's no they're sterilized eggs. And you find out what happens with the chicks, how many get sick, whether it affects the number in the brood that survive, all that kind of stuff. Okay. Same sort of thing, leaving eggshells in the nest versus away from the nest in terms of predators. Are any of these mutually exclusive? You know what I mean by that? Mutually exclusive means one can't be true if another is true. No. Okay. It's nice to have mutually exclusive hypotheses. Well, one of them is your control. There is no effect in this case. But a lot of times it just doesn't work that way. So in this case, a lot of these different things could be happening, but each different hypothesis actually makes a separate prediction. And you can test those. You can actually go out and test how to answer this question. And of course, you test the predictions. You don't actually test directly the hypothesis. You test the predictions that you think are specific to each hypothesis, and sometimes the prediction is not specific to each hypothesis, and then it doesn't help you differentiate. It might help you differentiate between, let's say, two hypotheses versus another, but not between all. So, I'm sure people, when they first did this, the predator won, but there's also, I'm sure they did the other one too, because I've seen lots of, I think it was golden eagles, they, when there's a black fly infestation, they carry a parasite, get the kids sick, and so they do, the adults do all sorts of things to stop that actually from happening. So it certainly could be hygienic in terms of infections. So this is what they did. Distance from eggshell to egg in centimeters. So in other words, pretty close, farther away, and then finally 2 meters away. Eggs taken by crows. Which each of those? Eggs not taken by crows, and then percentages. So certainly it looks like predation was a serious factor here. So it was actually an adaptive. It was both adaptive and an approximate mechanism. Was eggshells obviously are stimulus, and it causes the individual, whether it's innate behavior or not, or learned, to take the eggshells away from the nest. So, of course, we can't think of necessarily all reasons for something happening. In fact, there's almost an infinite number of reasons. Why do my keys fall to the ground? Well, one of them is that there's these people at the center of the earth they're called cone heads. Remember the cone heads? Yeah, okay. In this case, the cone heads have metal heads. They have metal heads. They're kind of magnetic, and things fall to the ground. So you'd make a prediction about how to falsify this. Well, how would you falsify it? The prediction would be just metallic objects would fall to the ground versus everything else, right? And of course, we could actually show that no, if you dropped me to the ground, I'd fall to the ground too, right? So we can actually disprove that hypothesis pretty quickly. It's interesting, during the Second World War, now this, I just want you to know, I was not there for that. If I was, I would probably be dead, and I wouldn't be talking to you. Either because I was too old and I died, or because I got shot on Omaha Beach, and there's a little cross out there for me, but that's about it. So, anyway, there were people, and this was in California, and you know how California is. There's all sorts, actually, that's not true. There's crackpots everywhere. I mean, we're just awash in crackpots. In fact, I'm sure we are probably crackpots ourselves, but we've kind of, maybe it's not as crackpotty as other things. So you'll accept certain things, but not in others. But there were people that actually thought that there were people underground with metallic heads actually affecting our thoughts. Just to give you an idea. Now, the thing that oftentimes happens, of course, is everything is adaptive. In other words, natural selection is so powerful, what's the word? Well, it never makes a mistake. It's always working, and it always improves everything that it can improve. So that, in other words, nothing is immune to the effect of natural selection. Is this true or not?
False.
False. The choking is a good example. If it was true, then natural selection would get rid of that problem, right? The environment changes. What was adaptive before is no longer adaptive. Same sort of thing. So when you're thinking about alternate hypotheses, you also have to consider hypotheses that are not adaptive or currently adaptive. They may have been adaptive in the past. They may have originated for a certain thing and then been co-opted to do something else. So let's say butterflies, obviously they have wings. Well, let's say they have wings that are kind of blended in, but let's say there was a mutation later on that was kind of made it stick out, and it was for mating. So you can have something that originated for one thing, and of course, so they still flap their wings, but why are they flapping their wings? Well, they're doing it for flight. They're also, the wings are the color they are for camouflage. And then it's also used, of course, for telegraphing a signal. Okay. Anybody read the book? Probably not. So here's a meerkat. Everybody like meerkats? How about Meerkat Manor? Big thing. There's one sitting on top of a termite mound on guard duty. While he's on guard duty, or she is on guard duty, all the other ones supposedly can forage. So what's a hypothesis for why he's doing this?
Predators?
Huh?
Predators?
Okay. But is he doing it for himself?
Altruistic.
So it's kind of, what is that called when you're doing it for
Altruism
kin selection?
or kin selection.
If it's for individuals who are in the group that are actually your kin. Okay, so one thing is he's being altruistic. Well, let's say just altruism. And then one of the explanations is perhaps altruism in terms of kin selection. In other words, it's not really altruism per se. There's direct fitness and indirect fitness involved. So you save group members who, in fact, are relatives. And then you're getting some of their fitness when they survive at the expense of you. Or it could be altruism where everybody takes a turn doing it, kind of like reciprocal altruism. Or what other way could you get an individual to make sure they guard duty? You think like meerkats might think, have ideas about their group mates, whether they're reliable or not? Okay, right? So perhaps individuals that don't do their share get beat up or something like that. A whole bunch of different hypotheses. So here's the kin selection. Group members, first of all, should be genetically related. Well, that's easy to test nowadays. You go out and you catch all the members, you sequence their genes, you find out who's a relative of whom. So, and one of the things that's found is that it's mostly true, but there's a few unrelated individuals. And if you look at it even further, it might be that the unrelated individuals are all of one sex. So there's dispersal going on once certain animals get to a certain age. Prediction 2 is that, animals should guard more often their family members. Isn't that a bummer? What happens if you hate your family? And you have to guard them? God, I don't know. I'd leave. Unfortunately, it turns out, that in group and social species, living by yourself is usually a death sentence. It's very hard to make it. You're much more likely, not that again. Community service, what did I do? I'm a sociopath. I didn't rape and pillage. Well, actually, I only do that on the weekends. Okay. So, it turns out to be false. Unrelated immigrants served as sentinels as often as family members. So, the kin selection hypothesis didn't pan out, actually. They were certainly genetically related, but there were some unrelated. Oh, that's right. They do it out of the goodness of their heart. Well, of course they do. They're so cute. Cute things do it out of the goodness of their heart. Just because they'll be snatched up out of the goodness of their heart. So what? So, reciprocal altruism might explain the behavior. You do it for me and I'll do it for you. Back scratching sort of thing. Different. It's actually cooperation, but at different times. Now, this strategy works because actually cheaters have to be identified. In other words, not only being a sentinel are you not eating while everybody else is foraging, but you're exposed. In other words, if an avian predator comes along, it's going to go after you. And of course, well, it could be also, there's another one, it could be status. The sentinel behavior is actually to tell the avian predator, I'm too good for you, don't even bother. It's another one. So the prediction should be group members should take turns acting as sentinels, and slackers should be chastised. Well, no data actually support that. Furthermore, when some individuals reduce time spent guarding, other members increase their contribution. So in other words, individuals can cheat. So this explanation seems to be rejected as well. Serving as a sentinel is just a result from selfish anti-predator behavior, nothing more. Doesn't matter what other individuals are doing. You're just so scared shitless that you're not going to be having your head down anywhere. You're going to be looking out for what's going to come and get you. So an individual should spend a portion of its time guarding, whether it's in solitary or in a group. And it turned out that turned out to be true. Solitary animals spend about the same time guarding as animals in a group. Okay, so there's another prediction. The decision of an animal to go on guard depends on its energetic state. In other words, if it's hungry, it shouldn't guard but forage. Of course, there's probably some variation in that. There's some stoic individuals that are go on guard duty no matter what because they're scared all the time until they finally get up on top of a thing and they fall off because they're so starved. Well, it turns out to be true. It turns out that when supplementary food was added, no. Yeah, animals spent more time guarding. So they didn't have to forage as much. They could spend more time actually looking for predators and easily have enough food. And then when guarding, predation risk is smallest. So it's also true. And also, this is observational data. This has been a long ongoing study. It's been going on for like 30 years now. Cletton-Brock is the guy who's the original PI. And pretty amazing data set. But anyway, these are all different hypotheses that are testable. So when you are looking at behavior and you're wondering why it happens, you don't want to just come up with one hypothesis. You want to come up with as many as you can. Now, fortunately, if you don't come up with all the hypotheses or a hypothesis that actually is, let's say, conditionally supported or true, hopefully there's going to be someone else out there that will. So science doesn't necessarily rely on you coming up with an explanation. A lot of stuff, it turns out, is false. And so suddenly you spent 11 years of your career going down a rat hole, so to speak. But there's always someone out there who's looking perhaps to prove you wrong, or just because they want to find out and they think about something better. So, and usually researchers, as they do more and more things come to them. So you have to rule out as many things as possible. So, infanticide. Why do lions and langurs commit infanticide? Any ideas?
I remember reading something about this, about the lions only kill the infants that are not theirs, just so they don't have to provide food for another male's child.
So it's for males only, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whoever they gave birth to, yeah.
Okay. So in other words, yeah?
Adding on to that is just to perpetuate their own genes with somebody else's genes.
Right, exactly. So why raise someone else's offspring? Put all that, even though, of course, all the lions do, the males do is lay around, eat, and have sex. Right? I mean, that's pretty much it. Except when other male lions come along to try to take the pride over, and then get pretty hairball. And langurs, the same sorts of things. And, of course, you can actually make predictions about what will happen. It's hard to actually make predictions that you could, let's say, test in an experiment, but certainly observational data could either support or refute the idea that there's actually infanticide on unrelated individuals. Another thing that happens is when the male lions, let's say, come in and kill all the babies, the females immediately go into estrus. So, you think humans practice infanticide?
I read that, I don't know if they kill them, but that, like, when it was a study, when it was a stepdad or stepmother,
Yeah.
they were kind of less careful and there was more incidents of, like, their children dying. They were fully their own.
Compared to individuals where they're related.
Yeah.
Yeah, their own children. Yeah. So this was kind of surprising. You know, people would think, well, why would you kill your own children? And it turns out that stepdads are dangerous. Not all stepdads. In fact, only a small minority. Those are the ones that we were talking about earlier. They can't be trusted, that they're sociopaths. Right? So they're out there taking advantage of everyone they can, and they're not their own children, and, you know, away they go. Unless, of course, they're corporate raiders, and then everything works out just fine. So, here's one. There's a thing called an assassin bug. You can kind of get an idea of how they go about eating. But the male assassin bugs actually are the ones guarding the nest. This is you think of an assassin like, you know, some hairy dude that you wouldn't want to be around. Yeah, no, okay, yeah. But in fact, no, he's got a tender heart, and he only sometimes eats his babies, right? So he's the one guarding, but it turns out a male assassin bug says he's guarding the egg mass, occasionally eats some of the eggs he's guarding. So, why? He's hungry. Okay. Good. Now the thing is, if it's actually, well, if that's the case, he's just hungry, then we're saying that it's not adaptive, essentially. Is that right?
I was gonna say that maybe he can't provide enough food for the eggs after they hatch for all of them, so that's why he eats some of them to better the chance of the other ones surviving.
Uh-huh. God. Wouldn't it be bad? Heads or tails, huh? You know. Whoops. You look juicy, I'm gonna eat you. Of course, they're little tiny eggs, and they don't know that they're anything. So, you know, what's the big deal? If it's a human, well, even the babies don't really know what they are or anything, so forget it. So, what there might be there might be an adaptive hypothesis for this about eating the eggs. So you're hungry because you need food, right? Okay. Oh, I know. Who was in his, Annie? You were, yeah, that's right. That's right. You wrote in a post about, didn't you, about being a clone and coming to class? Oh, no, you see Ozma. Okay, you. That's right. Okay. That's right. Okay, not you, Annie. Forget it. You're fine. She's not.
It's the real me.
Yeah, it is? You know, I was going to respond to that. I thought, God, if she can be a clone, I can be a clone too. We can both go to the beach. Yeah, we could all be clones. It would be great if we could both do something simultaneously. You know, you have a clone in the class, the clone thinking, oh, and it would be a clone that wouldn't procrastinate too, right? Wouldn't that be great? You know, kind of an engineered clone, or a clone that you've taught not to procrastinate, because if you did, you'd whack him, and the clone would learn that you better get things done or he's going to get whacked. Okay, so what else could an assassin bug be doing besides guarding? Assassinating, exactly. So, and it can't do both at the same time, right? So, it turns out, perhaps, that guarding is more important than actually going off, because the costs of going off are too high. And that, in fact, eating eggs keeps you guarding longer, and the fact that it's just the price you have to pay. So, we could probably make some predictions about why this kind of guarding behavior is actually happening. How could we test this? Well, we could forget about, yeah, go on.
Put
Food.
food at the side of the nest as well.
Okay.
See if he's still eating
So
eggs.
kind of the stuff they normally eat, put that there versus not. We could add eggs to the mass, right? He's off assassinating, and we put some more eggs in certain nests, and we control for the number of eggs per nest. Don't even have to, we can actually just do observational stuff. We have a nest here with more eggs, less eggs, see what happens. Now, a lot of times, of course, you know, there's things, nuptial gifts, where you, let's say the male brings food, and while the female's eating it, he's copulating with her. So, and the question is, well, why is he doing this? And does the food he's bringing actually affect the fitness of his progeny as well as hers, right? And so, in many cases, that is the case. And in fact, in really extreme cases, we know about black widow spiders, the nuptial gift he's bringing is himself. Boy, is that love. So, this is just another example, a way to kind of think your way through behavior or any other, whether it's physiology, anatomy, morphology, whatever it is, whatever trait that you're looking at, is it actually an adaptive trait or not? In other words, does it affect an individual's fitness? Or is it not necessarily an adaptive trait, it's just a byproduct of something else? In other words, it doesn't necessarily have fitness consequences whatsoever. Okay, you guys know what, you can read this. We're going to go over some stats later on about how to actually analyze data. And so scientific hypotheses, of course, these are mechanisms to explain what you're seeing, have nothing to do with statistical hypotheses. Hypotheses usually have a lot to do with the sample size, the number of individual observations that you have before you can make inferences. Oh, yeah. So remember, causation is not, correlation is not causation. In some cases, let's see, rap music leads to violence. If you guys have to go, it's okay. Or, that's the testable hypothesis. Or, violence leads to rap music. Who knows? Maybe it's both. So, in terms of correlation and causation, you have to think about, are you actually measuring, or is the variable that you think is causing such a thing actually the cause, the explanation, or is it just correlated with some other variable that's actually the cause? Is that it? Oh, I guess we're it. Okay. All good. I'll post this. I'm posting this on YouTube. So if you go to the main site, you'll see YouTube links to these lectures.
What time are you available tomorrow?
Let's see. I teach until 9:15.
In the morning?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I'll be here.
Like in your office all day?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to stop by and show you like my notebook and
Sure.
write up for the field study.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sure.
Okay, thank you.
Sociopath.
I want to get an A in your class.
You just hit her.
Oh. It was all planned out.
Yeah.
Are the reports due online or in class?
Online.
Okay, so the one we did Monday would be due by next Monday's class?
I think I put it up next Wednesday, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's already up though? Turn it in?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Because they said don't. I had a question. So the discussion or like the points that from the article is that due this week?
It'll be due on I'll set up so it's usually due the day of we're gonna discuss. So it'll be let's say next week on Monday.
On Monday, and then the research will be on Wednesday. Or not the research paper, but the field study notebook.
Oh yeah, that's
Due
right.
Wednesday.
Yeah, so the field studies, like the exercise 3 that we did, is that the one you're
Yes.
talking about? Yeah, yeah. So that's running too, and that'll be a week from today.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
No, it was funny.
Dr. Beck,
Hey.
you want to, for the reading?
Yeah.
Because I want